Over 10 years of betrayal by my wife with her boss left me stunned. The retaliation was swift. What will the DNA reveal? Wednesday evening, and I was in my workplace, reviewing applicant profiles for a position as the area manager for a manufacturing firm that specializes in weed control, fertilizer, and water retention products. My job was critical. Our survival was dependent on the farmers who farmed our food, and we were proud to be the first firm certified for producing 100 ecologically friendly products. Two of my office staff's spouses were recently promoted, prompting their resignations. Both families were relocating within the next 4 months, so we needed to fill their roles quickly. Our sales department covers 7 southern states, which are frequently derided as flyover country. Yet this year, a sales increase exceeded expectations. Karen, my executive assistant, came into my office and said, "James, all 6 candidates have confirmed their interview times for Tuesday. I am off now, so good night." Every Monday, I flew to one of the states in my territory for a half-day sales meeting on Tuesday before returning home. This schedule had transformed Monday evenings into my wife's night out with her friends, which was well worth the cost of a babysitter. My weekly trips were critical for providing our salespeople with the personal attention they need, and it had paid off nicely over the years. I hadn't lost a single team member in 5 years, which was a significant success for the firm. After returning from my vacation today, I had some time to go over a few cases before flying home. The employer has been encouraging me to give up this aspect of my career. For years, I appreciated the seclusion it offered. With a know-it-all wife and 1 child, the quiet time while driving was crucial. It also prevented our branch from having to hire a sales manager, which is an important factor in a budget-conscious industry. My son was in elementary school. My pride and delight was graduating in the spring and receiving a full scholarship to Northern Iowa University. He had recently turned 14 and was preparing for his GED. My wife, Michelle, had been working as an executive assistant district attorney for a year when our kid was born. She had lately been given a new post as a federal lawyer, which she accepted. The government position seemed to value her uncompromising hardball attitude, and the money was 3 times her existing salary. It would have been crazy to turn it down, and she was scheduled to start in 5 months. Despite being about my age, she had never remarried, and despite reports, I did not think she was gay. For the past 10 years, my parents have taken our kid every 3rd weekend of the month, providing my wife and me with much-needed alone time. My parents believed we needed this vacation to reconnect, and I must confess, it was the best present they could have given us. Without it, we may have ended up divorced like so many others. My son, Ben, was scheduled to work at our senator's office in Chicago for the summer, before beginning his PhD studies in political science. My father, with my agreement, purchased an ancestry kit for our kid and submitted his DNA for testing. We knew a match could only be made if any of their relatives had also supplied DNA. When Ben discussed it with me, I offered my consent, believing it may lead to a new experience for us. Ben intended to surprise his mother with the findings, which we knew would take 8 to 9 months to come. This weekend, we planned to attend the Grand Ole Opry in Denver before flying home on Saturday. My wife had arranged this wonderful trip to add to our life's memories. Michelle and I met during a soccer match during my senior year of college. No, I wasn't one of the players. I was one of the unnamed grunts serving expensive meals to the fans. She was the coach's daughter and always got free tickets. One day she got into a fight with her boyfriend, and I ended up in the thick of it. She shoved him, and he replied by pushing me down the concrete stairs. I ended up in the hospital, with 35 stitches in my forehead. Michelle must have felt bad since she stopped by every day to check on me. She had met my entire family before I regained full awareness. They then informed me that I had been in a coma for about 10 days owing to serious internal damage. As the fuzz in my eyes cleared, I noticed a wonderfully gorgeous woman standing beside my bed. For a minute, I believed I had died and was at the pearly gates with her as my angel guide. Then my buddy Angela arrived beside her, looking unimpressed. I closed my eyes, hoping that when I opened them, Angela would be gone, and the weird image would be gone. When I awoke, the goddess-like form remained, but Angela was nowhere to be seen. It turns out she had found another person to harass. Michelle, the lady who had stood by my side, never expected anything in return. As I gradually rebuilt my life, we began dating quietly. Following college, I moved into sales, while she got her first job as a management assistant. During a family reunion, her younger cousin inquired why she was still unmarried. To which she answered, "Because James hasn't proposed to me yet." 2 months later, I found myself at the altar watching her come towards me. Michelle stood 5 feet 7 inches tall with long brown hair, piercing green eyes, and a presence that could halt traffic. We were married, but by the 4th year, we were on the verge of divorce. I still don't entirely understand what went wrong, and possibly Michelle didn't either. On our way home from a trip, we stopped at Johnson S., which is known for its flying rolls and subpar meals. Michelle insisted on stopping since it reminded her of her mother's cooking. As we got down, she leaned over and switched off the car music system, indicating that she wanted to have a serious conversation. I quietly turned on a recorder I had in my jacket pocket, a habit I adopted for situations like these. "James," she said, "have you ever thought about having an affair?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. My mind raced with questions. What provoked this? Was she hinting at anything? I took a big breath to clear my mind. "Michelle, let's be honest," I said. "Everyone's had thought about it. The real question is whether I've ever acted on it, and the answer is no." "Why not?" said the woman. "Because I took my vows seriously. When we got married, they meant something to me then, and they still do now." Michelle sighed. "Times have changed, James. Marriage vows don't hold the same weight they used to. I think you should consider finding a mistress, someone you're compatible with. Don't worry about guilt. I'm giving you my blessing. It might even strengthen our relationship." The notion stunned me. It felt like she was giving me permission to betray her, which I couldn't understand. "Why is my having an affair so important to you, Michelle?" I requested an explanation. "Have I done something to make you want to sabotage our marriage?" She remained silent for a long time. Finally, she turned on the sound system to stop the conversation, but her silence said volumes. Michelle was always prepared to respond to any question, so her silence was striking. I began to suspect that something was terribly wrong in our marriage, which I needed to investigate. We drove for another hour in peace, covering around 60 miles before she turned off the sound system again. I grabbed for the recorder. "I am sorry, James," she said. "I think I've been reading too many romance novels. Those ideas must have come from there." With that, she turned on the sound system, as if the situation was resolved. But I knew better. Michelle despised those novels, usually rejecting them as rubbish. She would never read them, much less allow them affect her thinking. As we drove the final trip home, I realized how little I understood about her Monday night out with the girls. I had always trusted her totally and never questioned her actions, but suddenly I couldn't escape the feeling that something wasn't right. Was she going out to bars for one-night stands? When we got home, my parents were there with our baby. I prepared drinks for my parents and listened to them discuss their weekend with Ben. They treasured these memories, claiming he kept them youthful and active. They stayed for almost an hour before leaving, and I led them to their car, my mind still whirling from our chat with Michelle. "James," whispered my dad, "when would be a good time for us to have a private conversation at your office tomorrow?" "I've got interviews all day," I told him. "How about we meet in 2 hours? Whatever's going on, I am here for you," Dad said quietly. "It's not about your mom and me, it's about Michelle and your son, and I can say more because Michelle is watching us." "Okay, Dad, I'll drop by after work and we'll figure it out in an hour," I stated loudly enough for Michelle to hear through the window. After watching my folks drive away, I walked inside, got my vehicle keys, and tossed my tools in the trunk. "Hi, honey," I said. "I need to stop by Dad's tomorrow to help him with something, so I might be a little late." "I heard you from the window," Michelle said. "Don't worry, we can have dinner later." The next day, my parents came on time and were escorted into my office. We sat down to wait for the coffee to be brought in. Karen locked the door behind her as soon as it came. "James," my father began, "I owe you an apology for that silly prank with the DNA test. They found a match for Ben. He has a paternal grandmother who's been searching for her son and his descendants. He gave me an ancestry form with the woman's name and phone number." I was astonished. Dad saw my reaction and realized how profoundly the news had touched me. "Dad, I don't think this is a mistake," I remarked. "Let's see what we can figure out." I phoned the number and engaged the recording feature on the office phone. I wanted to ensure that the exchange was documented. The phone rang twice before anyone answered. "My name is James Brown, and I am looking for Mrs. Susan Green regarding a DNA match found through Ancestry," I told her. "May I speak to her, please?" "You're speaking to her," the lady said. "How can I help you?" "It's complicated," I explained. "In short, my son is your grandson. You mean Ben Brown? She questioned. Yes, that is correct, I confirmed. Then you might know my son, who I had to give up for adoption when I was 17, she explained. I might if I knew his name, I said. He was adopted by a family named Johnson, and his middle name was Michael Scott, Mrs. Green recounted. My face became pale, and my parents' eyes welled up with tears since we were so familiar with the name. He is alive and well, I stated. He is now a district attorney in Dallas County, Texas. He is also my wife's boss. He has never been married, and now I think I know why. He is my only child, she said. I have stage 4 lung cancer and Don TT have long to live. Would you allow your son Ben to visit me before I pass? If you can afford it, I'll gladly pay for the ticket. I'd like to meet him and give him my inheritance. Mrs. Green, given the circumstances, I'll let you make arrangements with my parents. Since you're only a state away, they can bring him for a special weekend visit so you can get to know him, I answered. I wouldn't let my son go on a trip like that alone. Is there anything else you need? Get me a notarized statement authorizing my attorney to conduct a DNA test, she replied. Given the value of Ben S. inheritance, he needs to confirm he is who we believe he is before altering my will. Understood. I'll pass this on to my father, I told him. He can work out the details and get directions to you. I rose up, exited the office, and handed Karen my personal recording recorder. Transcribe and notarize both my conversation and the phone call. I'll need them for the divorce proceedings. Should I handle the DNA test authorization? Karen inquired, knowing that when the recorder was turned on, she should listen discreetly, a procedure that had previously settled several problems. Yes, I said, but we need to keep this secret for a few weeks. I want to find out what my soon-to-be ex-wife does on Mondays. I walked into my assistant's office and said, David, I need to speak with you and your wife as soon as possible. I'm going to need your help with a personal matter. David immediately sensed the seriousness of my request. She'll be off duty soon, he announced. I'll text her and she'll come right over. I went to my office and made preparations. David and his wife would use my home key to pack Ben S. things and depart the following Tuesday. I would get him up from school and leave him off at their house at 3:00. As I led my parents to the exit, David's wife came. I instructed her to go to his office and ID join them shortly. Karen had previously transcribed the tapes using current technology. I gave copies to David and Sarah to read, recommending they begin with the conversation between my wife and myself. I gave Karen the documentation my father had supplied so she could make duplicates for my attorney's file, making sure everything was in order. Sarah and David had known Michelle and me for many years, and today's discoveries hit them hard. Sarah and Michelle grew raised in the same neighborhood. Even though they weren't very close, they knew everything about one another. Sarah was taken aback when she discovered the previously unknown truth. Do you think there's any chance they're still lovers after all these years, she said? Or was it one of those situations they got into and then realized their mistake? I don't know, I said, but I'm going to need your help to find out. For the next few weeks, David, I need you to take the company car for sales meetings. Sarah, I'll need to drive your car so that no one will recognize it. You can use David's car. I'll inform corporate that this is part of your cross-training, David, so you'll have to do it for the next 2 months. You're going to follow Michelle around on Monday nights and document everything. David looked at me. Since Michelle believes you are still making your weekly trips, she'll be none the wiser. My gut tells me it's still happening, I said. Why else would Michelle suddenly suggest I have an affair with her blessing? If Johnson hadn't changed jobs, nothing would have changed. I believe Michelle may be planning to move in with Michael Scott Johnson when he starts working in San Antonio. If Michelle can prove that I am having an affair, it would justify her filing for divorce in her eyes. I can see Michelle doing something like that, Sarah told me. It's become common to deflect blame onto others to distract from your own behavior. If you find proof one of these Monday nights, call me. I'll have dispatch send a couple of officers to inform them you've been in an accident. That way we can get a detailed report on their state, clothed or otherwise, and where they end up. A few cops wouldn't mind finding a bit of revenge on the DA for how he has treated them. Karen looked up and said, Robert Hill left the DA's office 6 months ago because he couldn't stand working for Johnson anymore. He opened his HES expecting you. You'd better hurry. Give Robert my regards and best wishes, she added. Tell him we still miss him. I departed to meet the guy who was now on his way to the Supreme Court to represent the women's right-to-life cause. His perspective on the law and its application has turned numerous instances on their heads. As I neared Robert S.'s office, everything began to make sense. Michelle and I began experiencing marital problems shortly after she started working for Michael Johnson. At the same time, I was promoted to sales manager and had to start traveling more regularly. If their affair had lasted all these years, I would have been an unsuspecting cuckold for more than 10 years. Michael S.'s pricey Christmas and birthday presents made more sense. Robert was waiting for me when I arrived. Sarah had informed him on our plans. Robert handed me a key to Johnson S. residence, as well as the alarm code on paper. He also gave me his phone number. Call this number, he told you, and you'll find people who can provide services at a reasonable price. I've spoken to them, and they are expecting your call. Why are the codes only good until the end of next week? I sought clarification. Johnson will get a monthly reminder to change his access codes, Robert stated. He intended to sue Johnson for child support from the day Ben was born. Under state law, he couldn't avoid it by declaring bankruptcy. If Robert was successful, Johnson would be financially destroyed. He also intended to sue Michelle for adultery, desertion, and fraud, for misrepresenting Michael Johnson as son as his. Robert proposed that I temporarily surrender my parental rights to Ben to my parents, while the legal dispute was resolved. Why? I questioned. That way they can claim you were using Ben against them, Robert added. Michael will fight dirty and sneaky, treating you the same way he treats everyone else. Sometimes the best offense is a strong defense. I offered to pay for Robert S. services using my debit card, but he denied. Your wife will see it right away, and guess what you were doing? Write me a check, and I'll hold on to it until the services are rendered. As I left Robert S.'s office, it was evident he was giving me every advantage and time to think things out. Karen had discovered the finest aid for me. I got the idea that Robert had personal motivations for pursuing Michael Johnson so relentlessly. Michelle and Michael were going to confront repercussions they had never expected. Robert Hill has just made his own version of the divorce game. I signed the paperwork to provide my parents temporary parental rights over Ben and described the situation to them. They agreed that it made logical. I waited for Sarah to come in her 2005 Ford Taurus. David was going on his first sales trip, and Sarah would leave her car at my house and drive him home. My kid informed me that Michelle would not be home for supper since she was going out with the girlfriends soon after work. When Sarah arrived, we exchanged cars, and I placed my stuff into the trunk. James, Sarah informed me, dispatch and all the guys are on board. Just let me know where. Thanks, that was my response. Robert said to call him if things heat up so he can personally serve them. I'd like to know why Robert wants Michael Johnson out, Sarah told me. With Robert, it is a matter of principle. Michael can back up what he says. It was intriguing to see Michelle and Michael drive away in their automobiles after finishing a first-class steak meal. They went their own ways. However, I drove directly to Michael Johnson S. house and waited. Robert S. buddies and my team had already prepared everything. I located a safe location with a clear view of Michael S. residence. Michelle was the first to arrive. She turned off the alarm by inputting a code, then unlocked the door with her key. We recorded her as she entered the house. 10 minutes later, Michael came. Michelle greeted him with her top wide open, exposing her naked chest. Michael embraced her, and they exchanged passionate kisses. As they kissed, I noticed his hands go to her breasts. When they closed the door, I stopped filming. 5 of Michael's 10 rooms were wired for video and audio. We had established a base at the home of Michael's neighbor's son, who was serving a lengthy jail sentence. Everything we captured at Michael's residence was live-streamed on their Facebook sites. Michelle had a crew following me, expecting me to take the bait and hunt for a new mistress that night, because she knew my itinerary. They even booked a prostitute that fit my preferences. I texted Sarah to tell her what I had overheard. She contacted her husband David and warned him that he was being followed. David, a veteran Marine, reacted quickly, moving his car off the road around 7:00 p.m. to have his followers disclose themselves. He immediately phoned a tow truck and reported the occurrence to his wife, who texted me the information. I comforted her and gave her the address. I went over to Michael's house and disconnected the valves from all of their car's tire rods, preventing them from leaving. The lovers were stuck. Police officers came with blue lights blazing and began searching for Michelle Brown. Michael attempted to deny her existence until the cops pointed to her automobile in the driveway. Finally, Michelle emerged covered in a sheet. Mrs. Michelle Brown, your husband James S. Carr was involved in an accident near Austin, Texas. Your parents suggested we find you here. I relished seeing Michelle S.'s face grow white. The cops lied to make them uncomfortable. After that, the cops departed, and I followed them. Everything from the police arrival to their departure was live streamed on Facebook, providing indisputable proof. At 8:00 p.m., my son Ben called. Dad, Mom isn't home yet, and my calls go to her answering machine. I am worried. She never stays out this late. What should I do? Call Michael Johnson and ask him to put you through to your mother, I said, giving him my telephone number. Why call her boss? Ben inquired. Because he's been her boyfriend every Monday for the past 10 years, I told her. I then gave Ben a video of Michelle wrapped in a sheet talking to cops and Michael in pajama pants. 10 minutes later, Ben phoned back. Mom's phone suddenly worked. She called me, saying she was on North Main Street with 3 flat tires. I knew she was lying and told her it couldn't be true since it was right next to Michael S.'s house. She insisted, but I told her I saw the video of her and her lover. When she asked for the clip, I sent it to her. Mom couldn't explain why she was wearing a sheet. I wasn't expecting her home for a few hours, but can you do me a favor and open the front door? I requested when I exited the vehicle. Ben watched me pull my luggage from the trunk and approached her. My mobile phone rang as soon as I placed down my luggage. It was Robert Hill. I responded and placed it on speaker. James, I just served them both at his house, Robert explained. Now your wife and her lover are barred from coming within 600 feet of you and your son. I'll notify the Austin Police Department before heading home. Don't talk to her at all. If she shows up, even for her clothes, call the police. Got it, and my son heard it too, I told him. Thanks, Robert. Ben, open the garage so I can move Sarah S. car inside, I informed the man. I need to be in Austin. As we ended, Ben said, Is that why the locksmith came at 5:00 to change the locks? Yes, it was a last-minute decision, I answered. I had Kathy order it since it was becoming clear things would go as planned. What prompted this? Ben was asking. The DNA test your grandfather sent to Ancestry. They matched with Ben. He told me about it at work on Wednesday. When I contacted the woman, it turned out your mother's boss is her son, whom she gave up for adoption when she was 17. Ben became enraged, and I held him until he calmed down. Then we walked into the kitchen and talked softly. I played a tape of a discussion his mother and I had on our way home from Denver. Listening to his mother's remarks was illuminating. Why does Mom want you to have an affair, Dad? Ben was asking. To offset the consequences of her actions if they were discovered, I explained. It's ironic that her assumption led to the truth. A soft knock interrupted us. Because I wasn't meant to be home, Ben said. A police officer informed us that they had stopped Michelle's taxi and warned her against breaking a court order. Ben and I spoke about everything late into the night, concluding that Michelle should have been a writer given her talent for narrative. I still can believe Mom had an affair with the same man for over 10 years, Ben added, his voice full of amazement. How did we not notice that? It was simple, I said. You were young, and I was a sales manager who traveled to different states for meetings every week. Out of trust in our marriage, I saw no reason not to give your mom my blessing for her weekly girls' night out. We all trusted her, Benjamin said. That's what blinded us to what was actually going on. I sat astonished. I would not have seen it except my kid pointed it out. Michelle had leveraged our faith in her to prolong her affair without repercussions. Ben noticed the tears welling up in my eyes and remarked, That's what hurts the most. It's not the cheating or lying. It is the fact that she used our trust and beliefs about her to keep the only relationship that mattered to her alive. If your mother could do that to someone she claimed to love, I continued, imagine what she'll do to us now that she hates us for exposing her. Ben stood up and made us both a new cup of coffee. A SMS notification appeared on my phone as dawn was breaking. It's from your mom, I said. She wants to talk to me as soon as possible, saying we have family issues to discuss before I return from my trip. How are you going to respond? Ben said, his voice filled with concern. Don't worry, I responded. I'll tell her to go ahead and laugh at the big dumbass behind my back with Michael. She can still move to San Antonio with him, but not with our son, Ben told me, surprised. Your mother doesn't need me anymore, I stated. My usefulness to her has run out. She wanted me to have an affair so she could use it against me in divorce court. She never thought she'd get caught after all this time. Hearing the brutal reality in my words must have been terrible for Ben. Few people can face stark reality without becoming defensive. Most lash out, calling the truth teller names because the truth hurts, but they eventually accept it. I rose up and cradled my kid in my arms as he began crying again. We were able to settle down before we heard Ben stir. I switched on the kitchen TV to watch the local morning news, like I normally do. Soon he was eating breakfast and astonished to find me at home. We were all surprised when an image of my wife showed on the screen. My son cranked up the volume, wondering. I felt sorry for him as he overheard Michael and Michelle saying how foolish I was. Michelle simply stated, "That fool is such an idiot, he doesn't notice anything going on around him." Then his mother made a scathing comment about me, which made them both chuckle. The reporter interrupted adding, "I don't think they are laughing anymore." He said that after witnessing 6 hours of the longtime lovers' Facebook activity live, their plot to match James Brown up with a prostitute in order to get a divorce and seize all he had failed horribly. The following scene showed Robert suing both of them. Ben went up to me and sat on my knee, weeping. It was a terrible way for a 14-year-old to find out that his father was not his biological father, but rather his mother's lifelong lover. Michael summarized it clearly. "If you're just a piece of trash in Mom's eyes, what does that make the rest of us?" I helped Ben calm down and explain what had transpired since we returned from Denver. I phoned the school to request that they be excused on Tuesday and Wednesday to provide them time to acclimate. Ben remarked, "Dad, the chief of police is coming." That drew our attention, and we turned up the volume again. It was stated that Michelle Brown and Michael Johnson, our current district attorney, would face criminal charges. A task team was being formed to investigate. I reflected on how public exposure frequently drives people to confront acts they tolerate privately. Hypocrisy pervades our culture every day. After breakfast and cleanup, I gathered my kid around the table. I handed him a copy of the letter my father got. Then I responded, "Ben, my folks are getting you up and taking you to meet the mother of your biological father who is dying of cancer, has wanted to meet with you. There is a reason for this, but she should explain it to you. As far as I am concerned, you are my son and always will be. If you have any questions, ask your grandparents. Ben, will you help your brother pack for the weekend while I call my parents?" That was my request. As soon as the lads departed, my daughter said, "How do you handle this, Dad?" "I don't know," I said. "I find myself constantly struggling to keep my cool. Remember, if this ever happens to you as a father, you have to stay strong for everyone else in your life." With those words, I contacted my parents and explained the situation. They stated they'd arrive as soon as they finished packing the car because they just had 1 hour till their flight. I had no idea how much my relationship with my kid would improve at that point. We watched as the boy I had raised left with my parents to meet his biological grandma for the first time. I prayed that everything would go well and that he would return with the same affection he had always shown. The district attorney's office seemed like a morgue. Michelle Brown went shopping for new clothing after her car was towed and its tires fixed. Meanwhile, Michael Johnson reviewed the case brought against him. Despite the lack of a direct DNA sample, they were able to link him biologically, making it impossible for him to deny his ancestry. The workers now understood the truth about their connection and their long-term romance. This revelation, along with the secret facts about Ben Brown's history, was creating a political nightmare. The statute had enlarged the definition of fraud to include the failure to disclose all important information, prompting Robert to initiate a civil claim against both Michelle and Michael. It was evident they had been scamming me for many years. All of the lawyers Robert consulted predicted that James Brown and Robert Hill would win. Most lawyers had heard about Robert's courtroom prowess, and none wanted to challenge him. By the time he presented his case, most defenses were rendered ineffective. Their actions was exposed on Facebook, and their apparent attempt to destroy an honest guy for personal benefit made front-page headlines. Michelle had just stepped out of a boutique she visited, recognized for its unusual apparel, thanks to Michael's status in the community. She didn't expect to run across a woman who frankly inquired whether she was insane for not understanding things would go wrong. When Michelle inquired what she meant, the lady said, "You've been a porn star on Facebook for at least 6 hours." Michelle arrived to Michael's residence about 3:00 p.m. and discovered that the servicing company had just finished. They mistaken her for the homeowner and advised resetting all of the security codes. It wasn't he until they left that she realized she hadn't signed electronically to certify their presence. Michelle phoned Michael to ensure he didn't accept the new employment in San Antonio. When he inquired why, she revealed her concerns. They began to suspect that I was only protecting myself since they were both aware that Michael's new position was a political appointment from the deep state. Michelle got herself some coffee, sat down, and read the divorce petition. The first blow came when she realized her own remarks had raised my suspicions. I was bewildered as to why she wanted me to purposefully injure another person for her personal enjoyment. My parents had told me about the DNA match, which established Ben's genuine origins and gave irrefutable evidence of Michelle's infidelity. Michelle realized that I must have been aware of her actions long before Ben's birth. At that point, she realized I was behind the previous night's occurrences, revealing the hidden realities about her life. The doorbell rang as she was taking another drink of her coffee. She rose up, went to the front door, and discovered Mr. Williams, Michael's despised neighbor. "What can I do for you?" she inquired. He handed her an envelope containing legal documents and said, "James, your husband, used my apartment as a base for his operations against you and your lover last night. I was happy to help because Michael Johnson got my son the maximum sentence as a first-time offender. The information in this envelope will also be delivered to everyone on your side of the family this afternoon. James wanted to know if you are laughing at him now." Michelle smirked as he walked away. Back in the kitchen, she opened the packet, which contained photographs. The photos showed her welcoming Michael into her home, greeting him at the entrance, and indulging in sexual foreplay in the living room. The photographs also included police officers. James' team had been thorough. The final printed page, signed by her husband, said that if the information was made public, there would be dire consequences. Her intentions to push her spouse into obedience had failed. "Michelle, I wrote last Sunday when we returned from Denver. I realized you were trying to set me up for divorce. Since then, I have been trying to understand why your love turned into hatred. Now I know. You blame me for what you felt was missing in your life. You felt trapped and longed for your carefree single life. That's why you turned to him to rediscover the single life you missed. By doing so, you escaped from a marriage you despised for a few hours each week. The only reason you stayed married to a man you despised was because Michael didn't want the responsibility of raising children, not even his own. With your opinion of me, there is no way you'd leave. Your pride wouldn't allow it. As a result, you've lived a life built on deliberate lies. I wrote every day you and Michael got away with it, and your contempt for me grew. How many times did you laugh at me, the unrepentant bastard? Did you inspire Michael to make love to you by humiliating me? What I can forgive is what you both did to our son. He'll be affected for the rest of his life. I can fathom how you and Michael, the news reporter, summed it up perfectly when he asked if you were still laughing at James Brown now. I watched Ben as you and your lover flaunted your plans on social media. It was painful to see our son as you joked about how easy it would be to destroy me. Michael said, "If Mom thinks you're just a piece of trash, what does she think of me?" I haven't asked him about his future relationship with you. At this point, I can honestly say you don't exist to me anymore. It was your and Michael's utter contempt for me that led to this. At least we both know you are laughing because you've left me with a reputation as a hapless goofball. Perhaps tonight you and Michael can toast to your victory." Michelle's hands trembled so fiercely that she dropped the page. She appeared bitter, furious, and cruel. To everyone else, she looked to be a mother who was just concerned with herself and her ambitions, not her kid, husband, or anybody else. Then she sobbed, breaking the stillness. James was the only person who could undermine someone's credibility without explicitly accusing them. Everyone who read his writings couldn't dispute with his observations on their actions. In his opinion, everything she had done was motivated by self-preservation rather than love. He should have seen Michael was forcing her to leave before Ben was even born. Michael's new work altered their plans. They planned to wait until Ben completed high school before revealing his actual roots without penalties. James was correct in one respect. Michelle was not laughing right now. Michelle took up the divorce papers and proceeded to read. It was heartbreaking. One of the claims against them was for fraud because they disguised Ben's actual background. She faced accusations of emotional and mental abandonment, infidelity, and slander. She felt nauseated when she saw the sum asked as damages. If James won, Michael and she would be financially devastated for a long period. James and his lawyer insisted that they could no longer dismiss James as an idiot. Friday was a stressful day for me and my kid. From early morning until late afternoon, family members visited us, including Michelle's parents, siblings, and their spouses, all bringing food to help us. Even my brother and sister traveled from out of town. We were overwhelmed with love and support. Everyone strained to comprehend how Michelle had fooled them for so long. They all agreed that what she had put on social media demonstrated her evil intent. My father-in-law and I got a cool drink and headed out to the patio for a few minutes. "James, let him go," he urged. "Jessica is in the house so you can have some privacy. We'll keep them away until you calm down." He remained with me until things calmed. "Jessica and I plan to change our will," he announced. "What should have been Michelle's will be divided among your son. She may be our daughter, but I'll never forgive her for what she has become." When my father called, we had just completed packing out the home. "Ben met this lady," my father explained. "You can definitely see the family resemblance." Their meeting went well. Mrs. Green was interested in our family situation and got Ben to openly express his feelings, which was good since he had been keeping things to himself. The lawyer got the blood sample he needed and then invited me in for a private conversation, my father said. He asked about Michael Johnson, and I told him what we knew. I learned that Michael's real father is in prison for life for killing his mistress's husband. I apologized to Sarah for not returning the item sooner. "The police chief sees a chance to take down Michael Johnson," Sarah told me. "He and Robert are collaborating, and Robert has provided some questionable items for the investigators." When I returned, the personnel appeared dismal and disturbed. David elaborated. I told them in general terms that some of us were aware of what was happening most of the week and helped where we could. "It has been an emotional roller coaster since Monday night. The kid is still struggling, so I am taking Wednesday off too," I reported. "Have you heard anything about Michelle?" Sarah inquired. "Not since Monday night," I responded. "Michael and she are probably busy with their own lives, making it clear how they feel about us. My son phoned me early Friday morning to see if he and his grandparents might come home late on Wednesday. I offered my blessing provided her grandparents approved. She thanked me for making her go. Why? I questioned her. Mrs. Green made me realize it wasn't my fault that Mom's infidelity brought me into the world, Ben told me. She made Daddy understand that we were all innocent victims and didn't deserve what Mom and Michael's behavior brought upon us. "I love you, Daddy," she remarked before calling it a night. On Wednesday night, Ben and I watched as my parents drove into our driveway. They appeared anxious and exhausted. When Ben stepped out of the car, he jumped into my arms. It was good to have my son home. His father unlocked the trunk and brought in his bag, which Ben carried straight to his bedroom. The three of them then walked to the family room to catch up, while my parents and I went to the kitchen for some fresh coffee. My parents gave me their impressions of Mrs. Susan Green. When we left, she was calm, my father claimed. Meeting Ben and having him accept Mrs. Green was important to her. Mom took out an envelope of legal paperwork from her handbag and handed it to me. "This was given to me by her lawyer per Susan's instructions," she continued. I opened it and discovered a $60,000 check and a brief note. The lovely woman thanked me for granting her wish and told me that she had already outlived her life expectancy before I reached her. The DNA verified the biological relationship. "Ben is a beautiful boy, and you've raised him well. Use the resources I have given you to get through this difficult time, and don't forget your values." I handed it to my parents to read. It was difficult to accept that we may have honored a dying woman's desire. Over a cup of coffee, I narrated everything that had transpired throughout their journey. I informed them that everything was emotionally behind us as a family, and that we would resume our usual lives tomorrow. The remainder of the week went nicely. Michelle attempted to reach Ben via phone, but was advised not to call again. Corporate headquarters was overjoyed that I was no longer leading sales meetings and started seeking for a new sales manager. For the first time in 7 years, I was sitting in my office going over the month's sales figures when Karen poked her head through the door saying, "It hit the fan." I looked up and asked, "What now?" "I received a letter informing me that your latest letter to Michelle was published on a Northern Iowa newspaper website," Karen explained. I visited the website and discovered the speak out part. Karen moved over to my desk and began reading over my shoulder. She was weeping toward the end. "I wrote it when I was emotionally upset," I stated. "Maybe I was too harsh." "No," Karen told me. "You just coldly and bluntly stated what her long-term behavior shows. Either one of them could have come clean." Michael got the benefit of a long-term relationship without the cost. That's what I thought, you replied. It is rare for the community to see the real cost of someone's behavior on a family in such a public way. For anyone who has been divorced like me, it is a stark reminder of the pain and suffering they went through before they could start living again. Look at that last comment, Karen pointed out. As a feminist for most of my life, I have fought for equality and empowerment. What this woman and her lover did to her husband and child has forever tarnished our movement, I said while reading. Michelle and Michael were eating supper at the bar and grill. The club is normally full on Friday evenings, but tonight there were just vacant tables surrounding them. When they questioned why, the waitress told that people were avoiding them since James' letter was published on the website. Michelle and Michael asked for the bill and hurriedly departed, knowing they needed to keep out of the public spotlight for a time. As they were leaving, Michelle observed her parents seated at a table. She approached them, and Michael followed. Her father glanced at them and said, "Mr. Johnson, I suggest you leave and let my wife and I eat in peace." Michelle left the restaurant in tears, recognizing the unintended implications of her and Michael's actions. When they returned to Michael's home, they went to the internet and read the comments for themselves. They both knew that the people loathed them. 4 months later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of my car, watching Ben drive. We were on our way to Sacramento after discovering that his grandma Susan had died. We were on our way to the airport to take the private plane supplied by the estate. Ben was hurting with the loss after growing close to Susan through frequent phone chats. When Ben returned from his trip, we grew closer. He pushed me to start dating, but I kept quiet about it, feeling burnt once and ashamed twice. Michael and Michelle had relocated to San Antonio, where the federal allowed Michael to begin work early. The county was happy to be rid of him as long as he paid back more than $35,000 in dubious costs. They now resided in a leased 3-bedroom apartment, prepared for the possibility of bankruptcy as a result of the coming civil lawsuit. Under Texas bankruptcy regulations, they were only allowed to keep $20,000 apiece. Our divorce was formalized in accordance with state law, with Michelle responsible for paying child support, while Ben was in school and covering 60 of his living expenses if he resided on campus. The civil fraud trial was due in 5 weeks. Ben, along with her family, continued to refuse to speak with his mother. Michelle has discovered firsthand that individuals can only endure so much before leaving for good. Ben had to face a meeting with his biological father, which was organized by the state child welfare department. It didn't go well for him. Ben said that his mother had warned her that he, like his biological father, was a heroin addict who should not be let near any woman. Ben announced in front of welfare authorities that both his mother and himself had died. We attended his grandmother's burial, following which the lawyer announced the size of Ben's bequest. It was overwhelming. As trustee, I discussed it with Ben, and we agreed to sell his grandmother's home, preserving only personal jewelry and a few photos. Back home, as the school year came to an end, I prepared for the first day of court on Friday. Ben went inside the den. "Dad, can you arrange for Michael, Mom, and their lawyers to meet with us and Robert on Thursday?" they requested. "I think so, but why?" I asked. "I want them to see the real cost of their actions," Ben told them. Grandma Susan suggested it. I phoned Robert and we scheduled the appointment. It was a gorgeous sunny day when we met with Michael, Michelle, and their lawyers. Ben spoke first. "I requested this meeting," the man said, "to inform my biological father of the following: the whereabouts of your father and his request to visit him in prison. He is serving a life sentence for the murder of his mistress's husband. You must realize that you are the product of a rape committed by a distant cousin when she was 12 years old." Ben gave him an envelope that had his name on the front. I enjoyed Michael and Michelle's surprised looks. "You both should know that my biological grandmother left me over $90 million in trust for my father, James Brown, until I turned 21. It would have been yours, Michael, if she hadn't discovered me," Ben said me. "When my grandmother discovered how I was conceived and what happened, her morals and standards changed, and she disinherited you. Robert, my trust will pay my father's legal bills. Michael and Mom, you can try to reconcile before we go to court, because if we have to, we'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. Mom, you have to realize that even though you created me in sin, that doesn't give you the I left the meeting feeling both pleased and humble. My son had stated everything. Whatever happened tomorrow didn't matter, since today I was given what actually mattered. The day of the trial arrived and the courtroom was full. Michelle and Michael seemed noticeably shaken. Robert carefully stated our argument, leaving no space for dispute. The court listened closely as the proof of their duplicity and betrayal was presented. When it came time for Michelle and Michael to speak, their attempts to excuse their behavior failed. The judge's decision was rapid and unequivocal, bringing us victory. Michelle was sentenced to pay considerable damages, while Michael was deemed responsible for child support and fraud. The legal lawsuit had terrible financial ramifications for both of them. We exited the courthouse with a sense of finality. My kid and I were prepared to go on. Life gradually returned to normal. Ben began his internship in Chicago and succeeded in his studies, gaining a revitalized feeling of self-worth.